our endless military incursions, right? It's not great, but military deterrence of any sort that actually deters the beast that is American empire is objectively for the greater good. Objectively. It's for the greater good for Americans because hopefully we can chart a new trajectory, one that is more beneficial for the American working class, for ordinary Americans. Because any kind of restraint, whether by force or by democratic mandate, would give other countries in the periphery room to breathe, room to develop. But it would certainly be good for the American population as well. So we could focus on ourselves, focus on developing this country, okay? Building our roads, building our hospitals, building our educational system back up, building robust public infrastructure projects, public transit. It's unbearable the way we operate. American politicians' hatred for Iran is uniquely infuriating. We gave Iraq weapons, including chemical weapons that they used to commit war crimes against Iran in the Iran-Iraq war. Hundreds of thousands have died due to our weaponry. Then we invaded Iraq years later in 1991 and again in 2003, leaving a power vacuum for ISIS to form. The entire thing is so Machiavellian and just evil. Yeah. And there was one party that benefited tremendously from it. That party, of course, was Israel. Israel benefited tremendously from this as well. Our defense contractors benefited from this. Our petro-capitalists benefited tremendously from this. Our developers went over there and did developmentary projects, so they benefited tremendously from this. None of you benefited from it, though. You got nothing in return for this. It's unfucking believable. We just kill. We rape the land. We rape the population. We pillage. We steal. And you don't even see any of that imperial bounty. And you think in your mind that this is good. Why is it good? Maybe because those guys hate us, right? Maybe they're scary. You're told that your enemy is someone to fear. That you are told that these people are your enemies. Americans are some of the most propagandized people on this fucking planet, dude. The idea that we are the world police, the idea that this is for a greater good, the idea that there's a necessary amount of violence that we have to dish out in order to keep things fucking stable, as though some random goat herder in the mountains of Afghanistan was going to be a ever-present danger to your First Amendment rights. We know who the real threat to our First Amendment rights is this fucking baboon right here.
A lot of things to talk about, but there's not much I can say to you about them. So one of those little problems in life. And we had some very good results today, as you probably heard, in Iran. Very strong results militarily. We're talking to countries about policing the straits because they are the ones, we don't get oil, very little, 1%, 2%. China, as an example, gets about 90% of its oil from the Hormuz Strait, and nice to have other countries police that with us, and we'll help. We'll work with them militarily. As far as I'm concerned, we've essentially defeated Iran. I guess they can have a little bit of fight back, but not much. Not much. We've taken out their air forces. We've taken out their navy. We've taken out their air defense. There's no air defense whatsoever. We've taken out their leadership times 2 or 3. Might be 3. We'll find out soon. But militarily, it's been amazing. We attacked Karg Island, and we left just the one little area standing, and the standing part is where they have the pipes, all the oil pipes come in. And we can do that on 5 minutes notice. We have it all locked and loaded and ready to go if we want to do it. But we chose not to do it. I chose not to do it yet. We'll see what happens. They want to negotiate. They want to negotiate badly. I don't think they're ready. Just on what I'm hearing, they want to negotiate badly, as they should. but I don't think they're ready to do what they have to do. But I think they will be ready at some point. But we're doing very well with respect to that whole situation in Iran. We are talking to other countries about working with us on the policing of the Strait. And I think we're getting good response. If we do, that's great. And if we don't, that's great too. But remember,
I'm skipping this.
We are ready to ensure safe passage.
Yeah, all of America's allies are once again unreliable. Unreliable once again. None of them want to wage war on our behalf or on Israel's behalf. It's unbearable, unbelievable.
Through the Straits of Hormuz diplomatically. However, there will be no military participation. We stand by our commitments and we are fulfilling our alliance tasks, particularly on NATO's eastern flank and in the High North.
What does the world expect? What does Donald Trump expect from, let's say, a handful or two handfuls of European frigates in the Strait of Hormuz that the powerful American Navy cannot accomplish there alone? That's the question I ask myself. And before we make a decision outside of NATO territory...
Yo, why doesn't the Israeli Navy go do that? Now that you think about it, why is it the German Navy's doing it? Yeah, get the Israeli Navy on board. Do they even have an Israeli Navy that's capable of, doing an operation like that? Put the Israeli boots on the ground. Put the Israeli boots on the ground. Get the Israeli Navy out there pronto. How come nobody is ever demanding Israel put their fucking lives on the line for this shit, you know? Yeah, they're so good when it comes to intercepting humanitarian aid flotillas off the coastline of Gaza. Let them go toe-to-toe with the Iranians, man. Yeah, get those motherfuckers out there right now. I've decided Karg Island is right there, ready to seize. Bring those boys over there. Drop ship their asses into Karg Island, dude. It's their war. Why you got fucking Germany sweating out here? You're being extremely anti-Semitic with this suggestion. I know. It's how dare I say, hey, it's Israel's war. Why don't they wage it with their own fucking troops? Yeah. Oh, Moin Rabbani says they had the same idea. Yeah. Why won't Trump call upon the Israeli Navy to open the Strait of Hormuz? I agree.
By the way, we would need both an international framework and a mandate from the German Bundestag. I would think about that very carefully before we take that step. And I see absolutely no reason to do so. It's not our war. We didn't start it. We want diplomatic solutions and a swift end.
And so we have been clear and consistent in our objectives throughout this conflict. First, we will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution that brings security and stability back to the region. Firstly, we are working with others to come up with a credible plan for the Straits of Hormuz to ensure that we can reopen shipping and passage through the strait. Let me be clear, that won't be, and it's never been envisaged to be, a NATO mission. That'll have to be an alliance of partners, which is why we're working with partners both in Europe, in the Gulf, and with the US. It's important that we continue that. It is not straightforward, and you can see that historically when there have been other conflicts that have affected the straits. But I do think that working with others, including the US, is the way to go forward. And I had a perfectly good discussion with President Trump about that yesterday. And of course, as you'd expect, I mean, we are talking to the US at all levels all of the time. The Strait of Hormuz is then a separate discussion. And it is a discussion. We're not at a point of decisions yet. And I want to really stress that.
Now let's cross to Katrina Yu, who's joining us live from Beijing. Katrina, Trump is expected to be in China at the end of the month, but in that article, he's making possibly a veiled threat, at least pressure on Beijing to try and help him. I mean, how's that going to go down?
I don't think it's going to go down well. In the article, Trump mentioned China is one of the beneficiaries of oil being shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. That is correct. He also said that China gets about 90% of its oil through the strait. That's not correct. It gets more like 40%, but it is still a substantial amount. Now, as far as we know, that visit by Trump to China is still going ahead. In fact, over the last 2 days, today and yesterday, Chinese and U.S. officials have been meeting in Paris to discuss potential outcomes for that visit that Trump is expected to make. And the Chinese side and the U.S. side said that was constructive and positive. So we're yet to hear any official response to this Financial Times interview. But if that meeting or that summit were to be cancelled, it would indeed be a blow. This has been months in the making. And the whole point of this visit is to stabilize the relationship between the two biggest superpowers, to prevent a long list of disagreements from spiraling out of control into a wider conflict. And there's a lot of a lot at stake for both the US and Chinese economies. On the agenda were a few.
Reuters says the U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday said he's seeking to delay a highly anticipated trip to China in early April by a month because of the Iran war. We've requested that we delay it a month or so, Trump told the reporters of the White House. China's embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Why won't they? Why won't they open the Strait of Hormuz?
Trade agreements, the discussion about the export of rare earths from China to the U.S. and technology exports from the U.S. to China. So if this were to be delayed or postponed indefinitely, that would be bad news for the companies operating in both countries. And it does show how volatile this relationship between Washington and Beijing is. China has made no promises that this meeting is going ahead, and actually there have been reports that China has been a bit frustrated about the lack of forward planning from Washington. But so far as we know, officials here on both sides are planning for that trip to happen.
Now, Katrina, one thing we do know about Donald Trump is he's very, very good at threatening nations. Now, if he does threaten to delay or cancel even the summit, what does China do then?
Well, I think it's very unlikely that China is going to do what Trump asked, that is to send some material help to help keep the Strait of Hormuz unblocked. I think there are three main reasons for that. First, Chinese President Xi Jinping does not have a history of capitulating or following any of Trump's orders or coercion or threats.
Don't do it,
and
my
we saw
goat.
this last year with the long-running trade dispute when Trump hiked those tariffs up to over 100%. China just said fine, and it hiked.
Get those export controls going, my goat. Do it. Starve out the American beast of empire.
Tariffs up in kind. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that we know that China has been one of the biggest critics of the U.S. and Israel's war on Iran. It condemned those attacks that happened when negotiations were still underway. China's foreign minister has said time and time again that force is not the answer. It's urging for de-escalation and a return to the negotiating table. So it's quite difficult to imagine that Beijing would send firepower to that region. And third, I think the last reason is that when you look at the Chinese oil that is transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, there are some reports that Chinese ships are still being allowed to pass. And that is because China is a very friendly and positive partner for Iran. It's the biggest trading partner, the biggest buyer of Iranian oil. So there are reports, albeit unconfirmed, that Iran is still allowing Chinese shipments to pass through, a few to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So that would reduce even further Beijing's motivation to send some warships or do whatever Trump said to keep the Strait of Hormuz unblocked.
That's Katrina Yu, live for us there from Beijing. Now, Andy Mock is a senior research fellow with the Centre for China and Globalization, a think tank that's based in Beijing. He's also a professor at the Beijing Foreign Studies University, and he joins us from Beijing. Andy, this was completely predictable and totally avoidable. The shutting of the Strait of Hormuz was going to happen if this escalated. But does this give China an opportunity to reassert itself, assert itself as an alternative to the US when it comes to a power broker?
Well, Imran, I think you're certainly right that the U.S. Walked into, a morass or a quagmire. And there's an American phrase, FOFO, right? Mess around and find out. And I think it really, again...
That's crazy.
For whatever reasons, is
He went mess around.
Finding itself entangled in a situation that's very, very difficult to extract itself from. And I think the best way to understand maybe how China is viewing this is there's a very famous saying, I believe, attributed to Napoleon, never interrupt your opponent when he is making a mistake. So I think that from that perspective, certainly while the U.S. is tied down, I think while it's a Navy, which was originally under tremendous stress. And, one way I've heard it put is while the U.S. military, the tip of the U.S. military spear is sharp, the shaft is brittle. And I think we are seeing that play out as well. So that certainly distraction, certainly I think, is in China's interest. And then I think finally, China's approach to this really has been, to any kind of conflict, is to resolve it through mutual discussion, respect for sovereignty versus any sort of direct military intervention. So I think it does seem, as we heard Katrina just say too, that it seems unlikely that China would intervene in the way that President Trump is hoping for.
Paper tiger, baby.
But President Donald Trump puts a lot of stock in personal relationships. And he does have a relationship, we don't know if it's good or bad, but he certainly has one with Xi Jinping. And he's going to use that publicly to put pressure on China to try and help out. His biggest card he's got at the moment is cancelling the summit. What does that mean?
Well, I think that's an interesting approach because certainly I think from the Chinese perspective, again, it recognizes and respects the bilateral relationship between China and the United States. But I think also, as we've seen over the last year or so, China also exerts tremendous leverage over the United States. It's not just the rare earth metals, it's the Boeing aircraft, it's the soybeans sold by American farmers. So I think while certainly personal relationships matter in diplomacy, just as they say in Hollywood, it's not show friends, it's show business. And I think that's even more true of diplomacy.
Well, talking of diplomacy then, China has a very, very good relationship, a good working relationship with Iran. It supplied technology to Iran just before the war happened. What's the state of relations now between Iran and China? Because China hasn't stepped up in perhaps the way a lot of military analysts thought they might. But again, if you look at what China has done in previous conflicts, you mentioned that earlier, China doesn't really get involved militarily.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, Mon. And I think, again, this is a very profound difference, I think, in approach to diplomacy that is more than just tactical. But again, I would say it's philosophical as well. I also want to mention, I think, a very, very important point here that's not perhaps well appreciated. So China, of course, through rare earth metals, actually provides critical inputs into Patriot missiles, et cetera. So this is one area that I think the U.S. is acutely aware of. But at the same time, because of its manufacturing supply chain for drones, its components, it is also, even though perhaps not at the state level, actively supporting Iran in this way. But certainly, I think, again, providing critical inputs through market mechanisms to Iran to continue this conflict, to defend itself from this aggression from the United States and Israel. So I think this dynamic, is also very, very important to appreciate.
But Andy, what is the relationship? You just mentioned Israel there, and that was going to be my next question. Is there a relationship between China and Israel that China can leverage here?
Right. Well, again, I think China's approach is, first of all, not to take one side over the other. And I think we see this very clearly in West Asia or the Middle East, in that it believes in the importance of relationships with all countries in the region. So it's not just the GCC countries. It's also, as we're talking about today, it's Iran, it's Israel. So and I think this is a very different approach to how the U.S. Approaches diplomacy in this region. And I think, again, we're seeing the negative impact on this. So it's not only the short-term oil disruption, the impact it might have on global economies, including the United States, but this may actually irrevocably damage the trust that, in particular, the GCC countries have in the United States. So I think, again, there are, very high costs to the U.S. approach of taking one side. And I think these are becoming more visible with this recent action by the Trump administration.
Andy, thank you so much for your thoughts. Fascinating.
The president is very dismayed with American allies. He's putting a lot of pressure on them. He wants help from them when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran essentially has at a standstill to oil traffic going through there, oil traffic that doesn't really pertain to the U.S., but it does, because that's how oil is priced. It's a global pricing system, obviously, and it's affecting the U.S. But he's frustrated with American allies.
It doesn't have to be. But even then, you would be destroying the rest of the planet. Like, you would be destroying so many countries that rely on the imports. Like, American oil export controls, especially at a time like this, would destroy the energy grids of so many other countries as well. So there's also that problem as well.
Numerous countries have told me they're on the way. Some are very enthusiastic about it, and some aren't. Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources, and they weren't that enthusiastic. I just want the fake news media and everybody else to remember that that was said, because when I've been a big critic of all of the protecting of countries, because I know that we'll protect them, and if we ever needed help, they won't be there for us.
All right. Our reporters are at the White House, Tel Aviv, and New York. They've been listening to the president's remarks. They're covering all different angles of this. I want to bring in CNN's Elena Treen first at the White House. Elena,
he truly is a baby. Like, he truly is. He operates like a baby. Like, he's like, I broke it. Why won't you help me fix it by making it worse, actually? Put your bodies on the line for me. I could totally de-escalate. And for the record, a lot of these other countries, these vassal states, are disgusting. Like, they could turn around and say, hey, this can be fixed if you just de-escalate, you know? If you left Iran alone, this will be fine. Why won't you do that? That would be the honest take here. That would be the honest approach. But of course, we will never have the honest approach when it comes to international politics, international relations, because these guys are vassals. So at most they'll say, oh, well, we don't want to intervene. We don't want to risk the lives of our soldiers, stuff like that. We don't want to risk our assets. What can our assets do that the American government can't? Right? Like, what could our assets accomplish that you literally cannot do? Which is true. That's the argument here. But the real argument should be to say, hey, we all want this instability to end. You are the reason for why this instability exists.
What stood out to you based on what we heard there?
Yeah, I think really touching on exactly what you just played from the president was.
I may have asked this before, but you said yes when I asked the U.S. deserves another Cuban Missile Crisis. What would your reaction be if right now nukes are aimed at the U.S. and you're within impact radius? I mean, that is what it would be. If we're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, like that's literally what it is. Nuclear arms are not meant to be used. As a matter of fact, nuclear arms are just a deterrent. It's the maximum deterrent. Also, there are nuclear arms that are aimed in the United States of America right now, at the United States of America right now. It's just, some of them are from our foreign adversaries, and clearly no one is using them, which is great. And then there's also one that is a foreign ally. Israel has nukes. They're aimed at the United States of America. I'd be more worried about that shit than Russia, honestly. Yeah, I don't know if the chatter knows this, but we have ICBMs now. You are accessible by nuke on all corners of the earth. Those didn't exist during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They also, not only did they not exist during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they exist now. And you know who else has ICBMs? Fucking North Korea. Everybody always talks about how North Korea, oh my God, if they get nukes, if they produce nukes, it's over, right? They have nukes. Then they were like, oh, well, if they get nukes, but then they also develop the delivery mechanism in ICBM, then it's over. Because they're unstable, they're dangerous, they're crazy. Well, they have them too. They have ICBMs and they have nukes. The only thing that is created for North Korea is that we don't fuck with them. We don't fuck with them. Do you understand? Perhaps that's the real reason why. And I was a fan, and I still am, in theory, a fan of denuclearization across the board, right? Universally destroying all nuclear arms. That should be the goal. Having said that, however, it's not going to happen until everybody has nukes, in my opinion.
Really the most notable to me, this idea of his disappointment. And he used that word specifically, Omar and Brianna, to describe.
The infantility of the German government appears to have no limits. The German foreign minister now says regimes like Iran cannot invoke international law. The most fundamental principle of international law is that it applies equally to all states. To challenge that is to declare yourself a rogue state. Yeah. Terror. IRGC threatens to target American firms across the Gulf, including Halliburton, Honeywell, Oracle, and Lockheed. Bloomberg, the massive Shah natural gas field in the United Arab Emirates, caught fire after a drone strike has shut it down. Attacks in Erbil, Kuwait, and Saudi continue, by the way. Yeah, footage of the embassy CRAM shooting drones over residential areas in Baghdad. Iran fired missiles towards Tel Aviv. One was intercepted near Ben Gurion. Hezbollah announced a third direct ATGM hit on a Merkava near Taibeh within the span of 90 minutes.
The countries, and particularly the NATO allies, that he says are not coming to the United States aid here in trying to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. I thought, what we heard of him actually yesterday is very much the same kind of threat we're hearing today. It's almost this ominous warning to countries who do not get involved here to send warships to escort these tankers, which is very dangerous, I should point out. We've heard that now from many top military, commanders and whatnot. But this dangerous, helping in this dangerous mission of trying to send these warships to escort these tankers through that very critical Strait of Hormuz. At one point, he said, I think we're going to have some very good help, and I think we're going to be disappointed with some countries, again, getting back to that point. But one thing that very much was clear, and it was a bit clear from that clip you played, is that he continued to talk about this idea of how he's always thought of the NATO alliance almost as being more beneficial for other members than it is for the United States. At one point, he said, I've said for years that why aren't we being reimbursed for what the United States is doing in the Strait of Hormuz? He kept saying, I've been saying that for years. He brought up this point that he believes that when these countries need help from the U.S. is willing to help them, not necessarily the other way around. One thing I do want to be clear on, though, and just some context to all of this, is what has been so interesting about the president calling on these countries to send these warships to help reopen the strait is that this is the first time, really, that we've heard the president be so eager to involve other countries in this war. I'd remind you that when the U.S. first struck Iran, of course, with Israel as well, a lot of these countries said that they were surprised and that they, were kind of caught off guard when that first happened. So I'd keep that in mind here as well. But really, I think this enormous pressure we have seen from President Trump, and I should note as well, someone who has repeatedly mused openly about this idea of withdrawing support from the NATO alliance, this pressure that continues to build. Even so, we still haven't seen a lot of these allies who the president said he wouldn't name, but a lot of these allies come out and say that they would actually send warships. You look at Germany, the UK, Japan, who I should note whose prime minister will be here later at the White House later this week. All of them so far being very cautious about heeding the president's urges here right now. Members of NATO are responding after President Trump warned that the alliance would face a, quote, very bad future if it doesn't help secure the Strait of Hormuz.
What's funny about this? I've been thinking about this a little bit. You know how we created a secondary market because we had applied such rigorous sanctions, such strict sanctions on so many countries that they basically created their own independent marketplace? What are we going to do? Add Europe to said secondary market? Like, if everyone else is isolated, then you're the one who's actually isolated, We are by force building brick by brick the BRICS allegiance. And then now we're adding what? The European Union? Obviously, they are servile dogs that will never decouple from America and American empire. But goddamn, if we just keep pressuring, if we just keep up the stress, eventually people are just going to be like, all right, well, how about we all just isolate America and this will actually cut off the head of the snake, really.
Now, the EU's foreign policy chief appeared to agree with President Trump that it is in Europe's interest to keep the strait open, but also added it's, quote, out of NATO's area of action. And a spokesperson for German Chancellor Friedrich Merz struck a more defiant tone, saying it is not NATO's war. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer spoke about the situation earlier.
We have to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to ensure stability in the market. That is not a simple task. So we're working with all of our allies, including our European partners, to bring together a viable collective plan that can restore freedom of navigation in the region as quickly as possible and ease the economic impacts.
Let's talk about the dynamics here. I want to bring in Jim Townsend. He served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for European and NATO policy. Good to see you. I just want to start on, I want to pick up with a little bit of what we heard from the president here in terms of the United States' relationship with NATO. On one hand, asking for help, not just from NATO countries, but from those from the likes of China and Japan as well, but also in the same breath saying the United States doesn't need NATO. And I just wonder, from the European perspective, where is the threshold for actual assistance here, excuse me, and what do you think it would take to actually get to that point?
Well, it's a great question, and I think there's a lot of confusion about NATO versus NATO allies. NATO as an institution, if it wanted to go to the Straits, if this was something that NATO agreed, like going to Afghanistan was, NATO could do that. But NATO right now would not have it would never get the votes within the alliance to make this an alliance operation. However, NATO nations can certainly come together in a coalition of the willing and go in there and do what the Prime Minister Starmer was talking about.
What is this? Breaking. Securities and Exchange Commission is preparing a proposal to eliminate the quarterly earnings report requirement and give instead companies the option to share results twice per year. What? Every single security should be like one of those weird Shamat SPACs that he blocks you for bringing up. All investing should feel the same as trying to hit a parlay on an influencer boxing card. Oh my God. SEC no longer will be doing quarterly earnings reports. Oh my God. I mean, fuck it. We ball, right? It's all fake anyway. Holy shit. The market is so fake. And this is making it even more fake.
About to go in there and to work with the U.S. Navy and get the straits open. So as far as Europeans are concerned, they realize that this is going to be in their interest because of the price of energy and other economic ramifications. But they're still stung by how they have been addressed by Trump and how the alliance has been addressed in terms of NATO. So there's not a lot of good feelings towards the United States right now, particularly because they were not part of the process in the run-up to this war.
And that's one of the major contrasts here, that in the past we may have seen the United States sort of feel out that support that may be there from allies before taking action as significant as we've seen here. Obviously, that didn't happen here. But in terms of assistance, the president is asking for whatever it takes, to quote him, including minesweepers, for example. What help could NATO countries actually offer here that would help in the United States efforts?
Well, one thing that a lot of the NATO nations who are seafaring nations, like Denmark, UK, and others, they do minesweeping. NATO has a very capable minesweeping capability among the nations. So it doesn't have to be a NATO maritime operation.
How are you going to fucking sweep the mines if there are drones flying overhead under a missile barrage? It's not happening. NATO is not doing shit. America is not doing shit. First of all, if America can't send their goddamn ships over the strait, why would the UK be any different? Which is pretty much what the European leaders have said, as you guys heard, right? They were like, well, if you can't send your ships, why the fuck would we do that? You're America. NATO is also America. And if Iran is urging America to send their ships and they're wild enough to fucking blow up America's ships, why wouldn't they blow up a French ship or any European ship for that matter, if they were to try to illegally cross the strait and violate the blockade that they're implementing? It's over. There's one way to open it up. Either we just keep bombing Iran and hope that eventually they run out of bullets, and that would take probably months at this point, if not a year, maybe more than a year. Or we de-escalate.
There, it can be the nations themselves who can bring their minesweeping capability to the Gulf. The UK used to have minesweepers there. They're not there anymore. The US did too, and they're not there. So I think what's important here is that that the allies, the NATO nations themselves, that this might not be a NATO operation, but the European nations know that this has got to be done. And I think they need to hold their nose and get this done. Trump or not Trump, a German war or not a German war, a NATO war or not a NATO war, we got to put that aside. And these nations can bring not just their minesweeping, but they've got frigates, they can do escorting, they can do a lot of things, leaving the combat activities to the U.S. if that's the way they want to do it.
We're joined now by CNN military analyst, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz. General, thank you so much for being with us here. And in response to Trump's calls to assist with keeping shipping lanes open, there was a spokesperson for the German chancellor who said, this war has nothing to do with NATO. It is not NATO's war. So, maybe you can sort of dissect the president's request here. I think there's a lot of folks who look at it and think there are flaws, but also, can NATO really wash their hands of this?
I don't think they can. I think NATO collectively as an alliance, maybe it's not a NATO alliance Article 5 scenario, but certainly there's many European countries that have provided littoral combat ship-like vessels, frigates, other countermine capabilities to many of U.S.-led coalition maritime efforts. So I suspect we'll see.
They keep saying no. It's so funny. Germany's government rejected. This is literally 5 minutes ago. Germany's government rejected Trump's demands that NATO allies help secure the Strait of Hormuz, declaring that the alliance had no place in the war. It's so funny. Oh, it's so awesome. They just keep saying, no, dude, no. Why would we do that? And it makes sense because Trump is not doing it, right? Like, what difference fundamentally would it make if it wasn't just American ships that are trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz, but like also different naval assets of European countries like NATO nations? Like, what is the goal to just like overwhelm their munitions as like a missile sponge? Yeah, we just send the fucking European ships ahead and they just get pummeled and then hopefully they'll run out of bullets.
Several countries eventually agree to come in. The United Kingdom is...
Like, I don't think people understand something. If Iran is crazy enough to attack America, then smaller countries getting involved is not going to change the equation. Like, is Donald Trump trying to create the conditions of like a world war against Iran? Like, is Donald Trump trying to get every country to create a coalition of the willing to send like thousands of soldiers and naval assets to try and like go and invade militarily the nation state of Iran? Because anything short of that is not going to fucking work. Because again, all they need to do is bunker up and just keep lobbing fucking drones. It is an incredibly cheap way of destabilizing the global energy markets. Okay, the more I talk about this, the more I'm realizing maybe that is the fucking point. I guess like is he going to try to do like a world war or something? Like what? Pelosi mobilized. Nancy Pelosi was spotted at a hidden bunker in Tel Aviv, kneeling in Netanyahu's casket in a pleather bustier and a visible whale tail from her micro skirt looking thick as hell. No, she was wearing that outfit last night at the Vanity Fair Oscar party, though. Yowza, what a woman.
So, you heard the prime minister speak earlier about, hey, let's come together and put together a task force, a coalition to support freedom of navigation. So, it's just, I wish this wasn't playing out in public. It's not healthy, I don't think, with long-standing alliances, the kind of, tit for tat that's going on. But I do think inevitably we'll see many European countries come to support this effort.
The problem is clear. The solution, not so much. Having gone to war with Iran, Donald Trump now wants the UK and other NATO allies to help combat the repercussions. Namely, unblocking the Strait of Hormuz, after Tehran made this vital waterway part of the war zone by targeting tankers with missiles and drones. The US president has so far received a lukewarm response from his friends, despite warning that his support for NATO may hinge on what they offer.
I was very surprised with the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom, 2 weeks ago, I said, why don't you send some ships over? And he really didn't want to do it. I said, you don't want to do it. We've been with you. You're our oldest ally. And we spend a lot of money on, NATO and all of these things to protect you. And then they tell us that we have a mine ship around and they don't want to do it. I think it's terrible.
Sir Keir Starmer portrayed the phone call on Sunday in a more positive light.
We are working with others to come up with a credible plan for the Straits of Hormuz.
I don't get it, guys. I fell asleep day 3. And the last thing I remember was Trump saying, we don't need British ships. They're gay. And it's a W. It's over. We killed the Ayatollah. I'm waking up now, 13 days later, and we're looking for alternatives. We're trying to bring in, British troops, trying to get them involved in this shit. What's going on? What is this? Semaphore takes less than 5 minutes to get Trump's number. Yeah. It's kind of crazy that this is a Semaphore article, but yes, I know this from Brace. I could get Trump's number right now if I wanted to.
To ensure that we can reopen shipping and passage through the strait. And I had a perfectly good discussion with President Trump about that yesterday.
Iran made clear any move to escort tankers and other commercial shipping through the strait would be high risk.
They are asking other countries to come and assist them so that the Strait of Hormuz remains open. Of course, from our perspective, it is open. It's only closed to our enemies, to those who carried out unjust aggression against our country and to their allies.
Of course, the best way to restore tanker traffic would be a ceasefire between the US, Israel and Iran. Otherwise, the US military would have to take the lead in coordinating any international mission to protect shipping lanes with its warships and surveillance aircraft.
The biggest coward man in the world, Starmer, standing his ground, incredible. Honestly, it's because he's just afraid of everything. He's afraid of Trump, sure, but he's also afraid of sending troops. That's the reason why he's he clearly wasn't afraid when it came to sending the Royal Air Force to go do genocide alongside Israel, right? But this time, it's not, his enemies are not children inside of schools. His enemy is the nation of Iran, and they got, clearly they got smoke. So that's the reason why he's maybe this time we stay out of it, I'm too scared.
As for what the UK could offer, it's a lot less than in the past. Right now, the Royal Navy has no warship to hunt and destroy mines in the region, whereas it used to have 4. Also, the single major warship that has been dispatched to help bolster Britain's defences is still en route. The UK has talked about sea drones as a possible option, but they fall far short of the sort of protection provided by a destroyer or a frigate. It's the reality of defence cuts over time that's left Britain so reliant on the US for its own protection, and so exposed if Trump really does decide to go cool on defending Europe. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Day 17 of the war, and of course we see the things we would expect to see at this stage, which is more attacks on both sides. The map changes every day, but it's a map that we can expect to continue in that vein for a while. more interesting at the moment is what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz, because this has now become a very hot issue and the politics of it are extremely delicate. Let's take the politics out of it for a moment and just think about the technical side. If any military was going to try to open the Strait of Hormuz, what would it need? Well, it would need three things. The first thing it would need is a series of air defense destroyers which could actually operate along the coastline, providing air defense against missiles or drones being...
This is so dumb. They would get fucking destroyed. I don't think that there is the necessary manpower. Guys, this area that you can navigate by sea is 2 miles. This area from land to land is 20 miles, and the only area that you can navigate through the sea is 2 miles wide. It is fucking dumb as hell, bro. There is no shot.
Fired from the Iranian side. The second thing it would need is a series of air attacks, probably, on targets inside Iran, any targets that could operate against something on the coast. So it would need a very active policy of hitting things every time they saw them appear near the coast. And then the third thing it would need, and this is the most difficult, of course, is a convoy system. So we've made some guesses here. Supposing a convoy of 6 ships was envisaged, and these would be tankers. These tankers are supposed to keep at least 8 to 12 ship lengths apart when they travel through this area. Supposing that was cut by 50%. Supposing they said, OK, 4 lengths apart is good enough. Well, at 4 lengths apart...
Dude. Geography favors Iran in any war to open Hormuz. The shipping lanes are so narrow, tankers and naval escorts are sitting ducks, perfect for Iran's drones and mines. Trump is caught in the escalation trap. Okay, Robert Pape, we get it. Escalation trap, man. Jesus Christ. Yeah, look, see? This is what I was saying. The shipping lanes that you can navigate are only 2 nautical miles wide, bro. This entire like land-to-land distance is 20 miles, but the rest of it is too shallow. So the shipping lanes are only 2 nautical miles wide. Ain't no fucking way that's happening. A Hormuz tight? Yeah, bro. That shit is tight. It's tight as hell. Fuck. It's tight, baby. Yeah, escort missions would be carried out by destroyers or frigates with air cover, Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyers, USS Michael Murphy, USS Spruance, USS Frankie Peterson Jr. Multi-layer threats are drones and fast attack vessels, mini subs and sea mines, and also ballistic missiles as well. Like rocket fire. You could have, I mean, it's opportunities are endless. Yeah, Hormuzi. So it's just not going to happen.
The size of these tankers, we're still talking about a convoy that would be about 12 kilometers long. It would still be a very large...
Why can't you put the oil on a much faster boat so the rockets and drones can't hit them? Are they fucking stupid? Yeah, why didn't they think of that, bro? Just tiny go-fast boats. How much oil could they... Yeah, just unleash a swarm of tiny boats.
Convoy, even with a warship at either end. So a warship at either end would need to be supplemented by sort of sheepdogs that are able to move in and out of the convoy to protect them against drones, against robot boats, against people with in rubber inflatables just trying their luck. This would be a very large area to try to preserve. Now, of course, this is...
Bro, that's like you put 6 destroyers in there, 2 of them are getting sunk. Easy. None of the oil ships are getting through. They're blowing them up instantly. And at least 2 of the destroyers are getting sunk. At least 2. And then the others have to do evasive maneuvering. They probably get damaged beyond repair as well. It's just not happening. It would be the greatest public relations victory for the Iranian state. I don't think any general would do that, but I don't know. We've been so unimaginably idiotic so far in the way that we have conducted this war, in the way that we prosecuted this war. It's just, who knows? Maybe they got some real dumbasses willing to do it.
Scale, but 12 kilometers of
Admiral, sorry.
target traveling 600 miles right up to the Shatt al Arab waterway at the head of the Gulf is quite a long gauntlet to have to run. Are there any alternatives? Well, there is one clear alternative, which the Saudis thought about years ago when they faced this during the Iraq-Iran war in the 1980s. They built themselves a pipeline that goes from Abqaiq to Yanbu. And that pipeline is very efficient, but it won't take the amount of oil.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's 15%. There's also issues with it's not all the refineries. It can only take 15%. Oil pipelines can be destroyed in the same process with like drone strikes. And last but not least, even at Yanbu, that's still, the Houthis could still start nuking the ones that are not going up the Suez Canal because they still have to go through this choke point. Okay, they're in Yanbu. Great. What's that? Oh no. That's the Houthis sound. That's the sound of the fucking Ansar Allah movement. What are they going to do now?
That still needs to be got out through the Gulf. And here is the problem. If they put tankers into the Red Sea, which they could, to load up at Yanbu, first of all, they've got to go out through this Bab el-Mandeb Strait at the foot of the Red Sea. And that area, of course, is threatened by the Houthis, who have said that we will attack shipping in that area.
Yeah, if you were wondering, like, Houthis love the smoke, right? They live for it. Why have they been so quiet as of late? This is why. They're just waiting for this moment. Okay? That's it.
Now, they haven't done that yet, and we don't really know why they haven't done it, but that threat is still there. The other alternative is, of course, to go out.
No, the Houthis are not particularly restrained people. I think like there's a tactical reason for why they're doing it. That's my assessment, at least, because like they are letting ships pass through right now. But if they wanted to close that shit, they could also do that
through the Suez Canal. But the fact is, what is the depth permitted through the Suez Canal? In reality, it's 20 meters. And if you think about the big tankers that we're talking about, 20 meters is not enough. This is a very large crude carrier, a VLCC, and there are ultra-large crude carriers, even bigger than this. And a very large crude carrier requires a depth of about 21 or 22 meters, and the ULCCs even more than that. So
why are the Houthis built different? I don't know, dude. There's some with the there's just some about the Yemeni people. I don't know what the fuck it is, but they are some of the most resilient. They're some of the craziest motherfuckers I've ever encountered in my life, okay? I don't know what the hell it is. Hold on, I'm going to give you some stuff back. They're crazy, bro.
Fact is that the big tankers...
They are built different, actually, unironically.
And it would be dangerous for them to try to get out through the bottom or the southern part of the Red Sea. So there we are. The fact is an awful lot of oil is tied up in the Gulf at the moment.